What do you think?
We will start our morning meeting. Thank you for joining us this morning. Good morning to everybody. This is what I'm going to call the meeting to order. Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Allen.
Here.
Mrs. Bitter.
Here.
Mr. Comer.
Here.
Dr. Seaver. Mr. Thompson. And Mrs. Weiss. Here.
Please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. This morning, as we start our meeting, I'd just like to read our mission and vision statements. Our mission is to create a culture of academic excellence through inclusive and innovative learning opportunities for the whole child. And our vision is to empower all learners to reach their full potential in a globally competitive world. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Mrs. Weber.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Mr. Allen.
Aye.
And Mr. Comer.
Aye. Agenda is approved. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Any comments, questions, corrections from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Mr. Comer.
Aye.
And Mr. Allen.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Mrs. Weber, if you could give us a brief overview of the protocol.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for in attendance today. In person in our meeting, for those of you who are attending in our virtual audience, you can find today's agenda on the Board of Education page under notice agenda minutes. Those minutes that we just approved from the January 18th meeting will be posted there as well. For those of you who would like to address the board and public participation, we ask you to address those requests to Mr. Christian Long, our moderator today, at longc@sycamoreschools.org. I did not receive any requests prior to the meeting, and then looking over at Mr. Long, he has also not approved or received anything request to address the board in public participation.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Weber. We're moving on to superintendent's agenda, and first up is class of 2023 commencement graduation updates. We welcome Mr. Porter to our morning meeting. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we just want to give you a, I think one of the strengths of our meetings is when we get these opportunities to talk with the board and also seek some feedback from them. So I will not steal any of Mr. Porter's thunder, but we've been having a lot of discussions, and I'll use his terminology about the run of show for graduation, trying to figure out and gaining a lot of feedback from stakeholders about the run of show. So, Mr. Porter, thank you again for being here and appreciate all the conversations around this topic.
Yes, very exciting, and good morning to everybody. Thank you guys for having me here. I don't know how much time they have allocated. I have a couple of notes, so just kind of cut me off when I'm going too far here.
Yeah, Mr. Bell, make sure.
No, so I think, Chad, I'd love to talk about the ceremony, but prior to that, I just want to share a couple of updates. First off, they have an incredible counseling department. It's been a new experience for me working with such a better team, a robust team, and I think they might be the secret sauce as far as why kids are so successful and SEALs are being met, alternate pathways are being met. I think last year, public report card, we were like at 96.5 grad rate for the total for 2022. And for this year, that'll be the minimum. Hopefully we can push to 97.5, but there's a couple of attendance things that we have to consider. And then there's some students that transition to TIP, and we'll kind of factor that in. But I think it's really encouraging as I work with the senior counselors. We're not going backwards for sure. So that's just exciting. But let me share before we get into the ceremony. And really, this is hopefully a chance for me to just hear from you all, get some feedback on what that ceremony is going to look like on May 21st, I think 1 o'clock, we're going to start the program. For me personally, it's just a formal rite of passage, classy event. For a lot of scholars, it'll be their only time walking the graduation stage. And so I've been working with our team since November And I started out a little bit early and urgent because just my background, these are the types of things you got to get going on. And so it's been really nice to have a good team to keep me kind of even keeled because I think we're going to be okay at the end of the day. So yeah, just to share with you all, it'll be a formal event. Chad and I have been very clear, we've got to find ways to be more student-centered or student-focused. Not just in how we talk, but like what are the actions and the things we're going to put into place and program. And some of the opportunities for that in the ceremony are just when you consider the run-up show or the agenda for the ceremony, how do we get more student voice, senior leader voice, and maybe a bit less adult voice? And so to really model that, Chad kind of raised his hand and said, I don't really have to do a speech, right? So that'll not only save us time, but it will, I think, amplify when the kids are on stage and have remarks.
And I think I want to comment there just because, when we've talked about that, we've asked some of the students, what do you want to hear at your graduation ceremony? And some of the senior leaders that we talked with, I said, who are the adults that you need to hear from? Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Do you need to hear from me? I mean, one shyly went kind of like, we really need to hear from you. And I said, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Like, it's important that the ceremony is what we meet your expectations because it's the celebration of your career. So if you don't feel like a message from me is other than just another thing that fills time and takes time, is that really what we're trying to accomplish at this ceremony? And so, one very honest young lady that I trust, she's Mallory's intern. She said, Mr. Lewis, no offense, because she's been at other graduations. She said, a lot of the adults say the same thing through multiple speeches. So that certainly helped me formulate in my head of, you know what, I'm there as a support system. It is a classy district event, but I don't feel the need to be a prominent display at a student center event. So I think that was one, in my mind, easy decision to trim out several minutes of transition. I'm there, I'll be there. I'll be there shaking hands and hugging kids and hugging staff members.
Yeah, and again, along those same lines, it was, the conversation started in November as far as what can we do to show and to live a student-centered kind of program. So we agree it's going to be formal. That's how this goes. If we're going to eliminate our superintendents, whether it's a speech or welcome, we're going to trim that from the agenda. Another thing that will look a bit different from years prior is how that keynote address looks. We've kind of been working with SAPA to organize a really good program for maybe homecoming week in the fall, and maybe back in all of having that distinguished alumni speak at the ceremony. So that's something that's not final. I'm hoping we get some feedback and make it final as soon as possible. But again, it's a matter of, we've got a lot of talented students, right? There's auditions, there's tryouts, there's coaching. And I think, again, just like if our superintendent, we can trim that, we're just considering other ways to recognize the distinguished alumni that maybe, and I think this is maybe 5-6 years ago, what I've heard so far, there was a precedent for it to go that way. And so we're open-minded to getting back to that. Two more things before I kind of start taking some notes here. One is looking ahead to 2024. Chad and I got excited about this. There's different ways to do this, right? It's just a matter of what you want to do. And this one takes a little bit of logistics, but in an effort to be student-centered, students in some places that I've experienced are able to think back over their K-12 experience and invite a single staff member to actually hand them the diploma, right? And so it's all planning, it's all logistics. And about an hour, I'll be at Central Centers doing a walkthrough, so I can even see the space, the lay of the land, come up with some ideas. But I think that's something I'm hoping we can pull off. If we can do it this class, I think it's a bit ambitious, but just as a heads up for 2024, I think that could be a really clear way to continue down the pathway of being more student-centered, taking their feedback and letting them reflect on which elementary, junior high, which support staff, which counselor, which CNS staff, like who's made a mark on them that they want to shake their hand and take a photo that they're gonna hold on to for a really long time. And so I know that can be done because I've done it myself at other districts, but it's about planning. I don't know if we have enough time right now. Okay, last part.
It made me very nervous.
Yeah.
Because logistics wise, I'm like, how do you make that happen with 400 plus students?
And I'll have like a 6 hour sermon.
Right. And he said, luckily Westerville South where he was about the same size, or maybe a little bigger, you know. So he was like, it does work. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to hear about this. Because I just picture, because you only know what you know from your experience. So
Yeah, and again, I think the key factors in that stage size, right? Like how many square feet, how many people, how many chairs can we fit on the stage? And I'll find out here shortly. And again, that's just an idea, right? So we'll have to have further conversation. See if we can pull it off. Here's the part that I think you guys really got to give me some clear feedback on is what you want your role to look like. The safest play is to do it exactly the way we did a year ago. I think that's a good decision. But we've been talking about who's the stage party, who's handing the diploma, who's shaking hands, who's going to be in that photo with the senior as they're walking off stage. So I just want to hear from you all, even Chad as well. What do we want as far as your participation? Is it the conferral diplomas? Is it the shaking hands component? Is it the handing the diploma component or something a bit different? So those are really like just my notes. So I'd be happy to just hear your thoughts and take some feedback on, how you visualize graduation.
one other comment before we open it up is just, if you look at the totality of the program, I'll just say they were like, almost like gap fillers. Like, it would go from, Mr. Porter to me, to the distinguished alumni, back to Mr. Porter. And just looking at a couple of those pieces, it basically allows, because if you ask the students, who's the most important adult that they have to hear from? They said Mr. Porter, which makes complete sense in my book. So it keeps Mr. Porter on stage after he does his welcome and words of wisdom. It goes straight to commencement of the program. So it kind of takes out some of those, I'll say, transition pieces. And as we talked about, I think our distinguished alumni, it's a much better spot at homecoming where people are back with the alumni, to hear and talk and celebrate that person. So, just share that's kind of why this came about, why this looks the way it does. And so I think we feel confident that you're probably looking at least 10 minutes out of the ceremony, which has hovered around, I'll say, an hour and 45. I think the other thing we want to do is that, as Mr. Porter and I have talked, we believe that this is a district celebration. The high school is obviously responsible for the planning and execution, but it is a district celebration because it's the culmination of many of our students have been here pre-K to 12. Some of them joined us later, but it's the hard work of all the staff and the entire district, including the school board, including the DOT. Like, we want it to be that kind of celebration and make sure that it's inclusive of all, and not. I think the other thing we've talked a lot about is, we don't want to surprise the school board with anything. We want everyone to expect and understand the process, and this is what's going to happen. No additional things being added to the rubber ship. So, and it certainly helps because then parents have an expectation of, it should be about an hour and a half. I think that's what we're shooting for, is roughly about an hour and a half. So thoughts, I know we threw a lot at you. Just thoughts.
Yeah, so my initial comments are, the distinguished alumni piece, I don't know that I'm not, it doesn't have to be done at graduation, but I also don't want to lose focus of that being a very important thing. I think it makes sense to do it at homecoming, but I also don't want to kind of tarnish the importance of the distinguished alumni. So I would be fine with doing that. I'm not as concerned with an extra 10 minutes. I mean, again, this is a celebration, a formal thing for the students, but we have to get it right. I like the idea of being student-centered. But, again, doesn't have to be rushed just to get it at a certain time. I believe the board should be on stage. You asked where the board should be. I believe we should be sitting on stage. Leading the procession in, I think that's something that the board should be doing. It's not gonna hurt my feelings not to shake kids' hands. I like the idea of including more staff and element, people outside of high school to do things like that, but I'm open to other people's suggestions as well. If there's a place for us to hand diplomas to someone who's gonna then hand it to the students, I would personally.
Anybody want to go to the next person? I've only done the graduation ceremony once. I will say that it was the best thing I did all year was to sit on that stage and to give those diplomas, shake the hands of the kids, look them in the eyes, and know that the work that I do on this board is about them. So I find that to be very important. I love how, like, if you have a child or there's a special situation where someone works here and their kid, like, I notice people jump up and do that. I think that's excellent. I do agree that it would be wonderful to have the teachers do that, but at the same time, logistically, I think that's gotta be tough. And to expect the teacher to go up there is a lot too, but they probably would love it. But I think for the board, I personally think this is why we're here. And we need to always be student focused and be looking at our students and knowing who's showing up on that stage and looking them in the eye, knowing that they got a diploma from our school district. So for me, I find that very valuable. I think this is a student event, but it's not just a student event. It's really a parent event too, a family event, because so much of what we do as parents goes into our kids. And I want to hear from my superintendent. He is the representative of our district. When my son walks on that stage, I want to hear from the principal, obviously, but I want to hear from the leader of our district and talking about, the future, everything about the accomplishments that have gone into the kids. I think you're extremely valuable. Your voice is valuable to our district. That's my position. Distinguished alumni, I think it's really important to honor them, but wherever you think that's a good place to go, I mean, I'm fine with that. I know that, I don't know, maybe like if more people go to a homecoming, right, because more grades are there, it may get to more people versus a graduation may be more limited because it's really one class. So that might not be a bad idea to highlight that person at an event like that. It's a really special thing. But again, that's my input.
And just so the board has a picture of what that would look like the distinguished alumni, I would say the biggest event for the distinguished alumni is typically the Saturday afternoon, like at Montgomery Inn, where they're speaking to, I would say, people that wanted to be there to support that person. Like, this is good to your point, like people that either graduated with them or, maybe they were on an athletic team with them or a competition team with them or an academic team with them. Like that, to me, every time I've gone I've seen that event be more well attended than, obviously our graduation is very well attended, but I don't know that most of the people are there to do that. And I feel it's tough for our distinguished alumni because I think we asked them to come to multiple events as part of that recognition. If they're from out of town, that's a tough, situation. So I think for me, it would be nice to pilot all in one weekend. They know they're coming in, or if they're out of town, and this is the weekend, and that way they get their celebration and speaking to a group of people. I think one of the things we learned is that it used to be at the game on Friday was part of the event. And it was out, they started to run into weather logistics, like what happens if it rains? I guess this person used to speak on the field and speak with the crowd. It's it's raining, but it's there. Then you feel bad bringing someone in out of town and speaking to no one. So I think what we want to do is make sure it's a prominent event, homecoming weekend, as part of the overall weekend, and really highlight this person and make them feel, good about being back and being a part of Sycamore. I think that would be and that's the way it was done prior to about, I think, 5 years ago, 5 to 6 years ago.
Yeah, I think moving the distinguished alumni to a completely separate event, because I think, as a person who went on to the event at Montgomery Inn, and actually it's a little bit more intimate, and you're right, the people that are supporting them, and, no offense to the distinguished alumni that we've had over the past few years, but they don't really typically have much interaction with our students. So it's, placing it at graduation, it just doesn't, it kind of, for me, it always felt flat. So I think removing that is fine. I think it's great to have it student-centered. I'm excited to see a focus on that, much more than adults or transitions that are happening in the district that don't really, that's not what the graduation is about. It's to celebrate their accomplishments and to look forward to what they're going, their next step in their life, and hopefully kind of solidify that, they had a good experience at Sycamore and that we prepared them well, and that they will always be part of the Sycamore family. So, good luck with the planning. We have a talk, I will share our thoughts.
I echo the sentiment that student centered and formal is very appropriate. One of my favorite, I've probably been to a dozen Sycamore graduations, so I've seen several different ones. I'll have to say, I'm fully on board with moving the distinguished alumni, but to me, the highlight of last year's graduation was the speech. And our distinguished alumni knew the students because he was in the building as
That was unique.
I just want to highlight that the highlight of that graduation, and I've seen many, was, love people, use things, don't use people and love things. I still remember that comment. It still sticks with me. I think everyone who went to that graduation remembers that speech and those comments. And so there have been moments when that distinguished alumni was highlight. So I just wanted to remember that. I also remember Dr. Izzy Rizma's with the video of his basketball. That was really engaging for the whole group. Having said all of that, I'm supportive of the idea of moving it off. But it's sometimes what is said and who is saying it that can make all of the difference in the world. The student part that has been a hit for me every single year is the soloists, the musicians, the talent that we have in this district on display at that moment. It just knocks your socks off. So I would say, you haven't mentioned that, but let's please not lose that opportunity. I think there's auditions for that. That for me has been a consistent highlight of the graduation moment. And it fits exactly what you're talking about, being student centered, etc. I agree with some of my colleagues here. The leading the processional, the being on stage, the part of, I think it lends to the formality of having the superintendent and the board confer on the degree. I also agree with the sentiment that the person that those kids will equate most to their high school experience, formality is the principal, Mr. Porter. So I think you need to play a very lead role in the process. About the specifics of who hands the diplomas or who's in the picture or who shakes the hand, I'm open to what we think is best. I don't want to be too prescriptive on that, but I think what you're describing in principle, I'm very supportive of.
Mr. Comfort, I want to reassure you that the focus, we want the focus to be those, not only the handing of diplomas and getting your diploma, but those student performances. That is the highlight that you remember from the ceremony.
The one thing I think we don't want at this ceremony as well, and not to be negative, is I don't think it needs to be a celebration of the retirements that are going on in the district. That has happened on more than one occasion. And while they're really important resources and really important moments, I do think that's not the purpose of the graduation. So as much as we want to honor different people that have been meaningful. I always felt like that was a misplaced moment for those events. So I just wanted to be clear on that. That very deserved recognition, but just maybe not at that particular moment.
Yeah, I think we're aligned.
Yeah, I feel like this has been very helpful here, and nothing should take place if it's not in the agenda or the runner show. And so I feel like that'll be, very easy to take care of. And so for retirees or distinguished alumni, there's got to be time and space. But I think graduation is student-centered and also recognizing a lot of moms and dads and guardians and parents that also are looking forward to that crowd. Considering all that should be the priority.
I do really like the effort that we've made to invite elementary teachers, middle school. and
Yeah,
junior
so we'll get those out.
We've seen that kind of grow significantly in the last 5 or 6 years. I think we recognize them in the actual ceremony. And they get an opportunity to stand up because they have been significant parts. So I really want to make that effort to continue to invite staff and encourage
Yes.
all of our teachers.
That's something that I think that you're spot on. I think we're on the same page. And I've been working with the team. And after I got this morning's feedback, we're organizing invitations to other buildings, building administrations, all the way from K through 12, all members of the board, flight team. So everybody will get an invitation from the high school with specifics. They're kind of talking through your role, senior ratings, kind of how you support the program. So we're on the same page with the district-wide.
So Mr. Porter, are you the person in charge, or is this something you're going to delegate?
I will be in charge.
Then I would say 2 final comments. Just one, this doesn't, if we decide to go very student-centered and have staff participation in the distribution of diplomas, that doesn't mean we don't want the board standing up, helping, organizing and jumping in. If there may be a student that really well, or like, and I've seen you all do it. Yeah, or absolutely. Like, we would never take that. It's like, that is a special moment. Like, Paul was like, I'm still giving, Emily her diploma. And I'm like, I totally get it. You deserve that. Every board member deserves that opportunity, especially there may be a student that you're very close with.
There's more than you would think, Chad. There's a lot of families that we are close to, and it's not going to be onesie twosie, I don't think, in that regard.
Yes, absolutely okay. The other thing, Mr. White, when you were talking about distinguished alumni, you gave me a great idea, and it certainly flows nicely with what we're doing, which is, we have that Saturday event, the Friday before, because Mr. Porter been working with Mrs. Downhour, and they had their first career exploration seminar with a business owner that came in and talked to kids about things of that nature. And so it gives me that idea to use that Friday in Abesville to be able to bring that distinguished alumni to have a real intimate conversation with students instead of just like a speech. It's really sharing their experience. And like Mr. Bird would have been great sharing his experience and his life experience. Actually, I owe Mr. Bird a call, so I'll make sure I pass the one that was.
For have fun, just thinking that out. When I like I said, last year was my first time attending and as a board member, the staff at Cintas Center really said to us, we were so pleased by your school district and your students. They're so respectful, they're organized, they really did a wonderful job in their ceremony. So that's something clearly we want to continue with. I don't think that's always the case, and I don't know that that's always been the case in the past, like years past, but that's something we want to, and I didn't realize that would ever even have been a potential worry, but the Cintas Center was just very thankful for that our district did that. So we need to, obviously, we would not do that practice.
I was gonna say, I will say I've gone to, I think out of the 11 years, I've been here 10 graduations at this point, due to a prior commitment. Our kids are always described by the staff as well behaved. And I know it's a lot of coaching that they do, in advance of the ceremony. We've not had any incidents, so we don't expect any additional incidents. I know we're under a time crunch, but Mr. Porter, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter.
Really appreciate all your work and your thought about making this a student-centered event.
And May 21st.
Right.
Right.
I'll be there tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love it.
All right, so if that's okay, I'll head down.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't need to stay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, next up, I need a motion for the approval for the authorization to advertise for bids for this purchase.
So move.
Second.
Yeah, so as part of the capital improvement PI funds that were approved by you all, that allocated $400,000 for the purchase of the new buses. Just to have a little context, we have a replacement cycle that we work through for our buses to ensure that we have an updated fleet and that we're not overly spending money on repairs of that nature and things like that. So I work really closely with our transportation department to determine the specific needs of the buses. And so this is the authorization for us to move forward with that yearly purchase.
And at this point, it's just to get bids.
Correct. Yep. And our hope is always to come in under that number.
Any questions? Mrs. Weber?
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mrs. White,
Aye.
Mr. Comer.
Aye.
Mr. Bell.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of change orders to the junior high construction project.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions from the board? Mrs. Weber?
Mrs. White,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mr. Bell,
Aye,
Mr.
aye. Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of change orders Sycamore High School renovation project, JMP number 2.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Mrs. Weber?
Mrs. White,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mr. Bell,
Aye.
Mr. Comer.
Aye.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of Ohio High School athletic association.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Weber?
Mr. Comer,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mr. Bell,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. Lewis, moving on to other.
Just a couple of quick things. We have 65 DECA students that advanced to the state competition in March. If they are successful there and winning, they head to internationals in Orlando. So I know that Mr. Steveley has high expectations that there'll be some students headed to Orlando. So,
Yeah, and I just add, I had the opportunity to judge that, and Mr. Steveley's preparation of our students versus other districts was very noticeable. And it's an outstanding group of students that can.
Mr. Lewis, just for the benefit of people who will watch this, can you give a little bit of information about DECA and what they're doing, where that program comes from and
So it's a Great Oaks program. Mr. Steveley is the teacher. Marketing. And basically what they're participating in is a competition of those skills that they learned in class. So. And I do know that based on the number of trophies, the number of times that our students have traveled. Mr. Balance point, Mr. Steveley is very successful at not only recruiting students to be in the class, because I will say he is kind of I'll say a staple program at the high school. But if you talk to students, it's often one of their favorite classes and often influences their decision on what they decide to go into. When they go into.
like a career readiness type of education?
I would say a lot of it, but it's marketing, it's,
Foundations.
it really is focused on that. So. Couple of other highlights, 150 orchestra, choir, and band students participated in OMEA solo and ensemble performance. The students prepare either a voice or an instrument solo. They get accompaniment by a piano, and then they get rated. Over 95% of our students were either superior or excellent rated. Pretty awesome. Outstanding. And then our Sycamore Winds performed, I think they call it Winds 3 or Band 3 at the high school, but outstanding performance they were performing with CCM Winds recently. And there was a shout out from our band, Matthew Grassley, who was a member of the All-State Band, was also the winner of the OMEA Young Composers initiative. And basically, his composition then gets performed at the OMEA conference. And this is, I believe, his second year. Pretty impressive. Last thing, Mr. Porter and I had a chance to spend some time with our robotics team this past Saturday at Walnut Hills. Abe's Ablaze won an award. It was called the Promote Award. They also got a Connect Award. The Promote Award is just basically an ambassador for the first program. And then the Connect Award was the business and STEM work. The junior high teams, there are two of them that perform. The Thunderbolts and the Electric Warriors. One team got an alliance recognition, professional and technical work, and the Thunderbolts got a motivate. Team Juniper was not performing there. They select competition based on what's best for their teams. But it was fun to watch. It was fun to engage with our students and also our coaches. A lot of the coaches are volunteer from other walks of life. They're not necessarily Sycamore employees. So really appreciate those parents and the dedication of time. And I also have to throw a shout out to one of our business partners. One of the things, if you've ever seen these robotics competition, they have to build fields. If you've ever seen them, they're probably about the size of this square that we're sitting in, roughly the U part of the U that we're sitting in. Info Trust allowed us to use some space at their office for one of our or some of our teams. So again, it's a great business partnership. That's all I have.
Great, thank you very much. Moving on to treasurer's agenda. I'll see.
We're getting really, really close. So we're at the point with our policy project that we're trying to get through sort of the final discussion and potential revisions to the policy manual. Sent you the notes and updates from our last discussion. We were able to have all together in the summer. It's the board to provide any comments, and I have a few that have been classified for this final. So I do have paper copies of those, if anybody would like.
That would be great.
That we reference them as discussion. All right. So if it works for everyone here, we just go through a little bit at a time. Make sure we have finalization of revisions or any comments from the board. Okay, so first up is policy AC, and with that, I'm anticipating that it may impact ACR, which was also brought up on the one for discussion. Yes, so this is the wise one.
I was like, I didn't know the only one who, okay.
I think you were the only one except for policies. I think you're gonna talk about.
Oh, that's great, okay. This was on my agenda to do this weekend and other things came up, but I hopefully, thank you, Mrs. Weber, for being so accommodating to put this together last minute. I got to yesterday evening. Okay, so the question, or I had a question mark near for AC and ACR in terms of, I believe there was, my comments before was the possibility of adding other protected classes, and that OSBA requires review by district legal counsel to go beyond what is included in the law. There was also some questions about, is the board allowed to follow federal Title IX regulations in opposition to the State Board of Education ruling and the statement that they put out? And I just didn't know if Kenna had a response to that yet, or
Yes, the termination by the State Board of Education is not binding on our.
Okay.
Education, which I think is what we would want, so we do not have to be continue to follow Title IX.
Is everybody in agreement with that? Okay, I just wanted
Yes.
to clarify that part of it, and then, and I think then, okay, so that's all I really had on AC, and if we go to ACR, is everyone okay to move on? to-
Yes.
Okay, for ACR, my question was the role that the board would have in an appeal process, and I wanted to just have more of a discussion with the board and obviously administration in terms of how we see, what we see our role in that process, if any.
Yeah, one thing I will point out about those of these policies that Mrs. Kay Cox from OSBA said to me as we were discussing them is that these are ones that if you want to do anything that would be different from the law, these are things that would typically, could eventually have some kind of action taken against the Board of Education. So when you're looking at the policies around these, procedures around these, if there's anything that you feel would be different than what OSBA typically would recommend, I really want you to go through that with your legal counsel, just to make sure that you know the pros and cons of changes to that. So this may be one that if there's a different role that you want the board to have in this process, that perhaps we should just talk about that with our general counsel prior to making that change. So if that's something that you're all in agreement that you'd like to look at differently, then we'll take that to legal counsel. But if you feel, I think, is that the discussion you want to have? Is just everyone okay with it?
So in your question, the appeal process where it says designates decision, superintendent or designates decision will be final.
Yeah, I mean, let me just say this, in terms of how we as a district have operated, at least for the last 7 years that I've been here. We are made, the board is made aware by the superintendent very clearly of any case that we might have, whatever, say disciplinary actions happening, et cetera. And we also know if that case has been appealed and the process that we follow. So I don't, from a policy and also I guess procedural way, I don't have an issue with how we're doing it in our district. The question is whether we should change that in our policy, just to make sure that we are not just following the chain of command, which we do, but is the final arbiter of that the Board of Education, or do we feel comfortable leaving it as superintendent and his or her or their designee? And I don't have I guess I have an opinion. When it works well, it's great, but the question is, if we ever had a superintendent who went rogue, what do we have protecting us as a board? That's my only, and it's, like I said, I don't have that concern right now with who's sitting in the chair, but I think that that's something that, and do we want to be, does the board want to be that kind of final decision maker?
I just have a general question, or not really a question, I have a statement. So this clarification from this board. So this ACR this is a new policy in that, I mean, that we always had the non-discrimination policy. This is just clarifying with the regulation. My understanding is this is a relatively new, clarify, make sure that you do it like this, show your procedure properly in your board policy. That's what this was. And that this is the language specifically that the OSBA has told us, has given us advice to use. Is that correct? That's correct. So if we have any questions on it, I think we should if there is any doubt, then we should go ask our general counsel to that question. Like, I think, I agree, I understand what you're saying. Whenever you have that the superintendent has the final decision, that can be something that the board might not find advantageous. However, we always have the ability to change that outcome. But you're right, we may have to go then and change a policy. So why don't we just talk to our legal counsel now and ask the question instead of
Your
waiting
comments
down the
gave
line.
me clarity on what your findings. It's not that you want an additional level of appeal. It's not that you want to basically reassign it to the board from the superintendent. That's not what your thought is at all. It's more about just providing some kind of protection for the board to make sure you guys continue to have awareness of situations and some ability to be able to enforce that. Okay, but that's helpful.
Yeah.
Just to know, to give some clarity around what your concern is. So I think that's something that I'll probably talk more with legal counsel.
Yeah, I think just get a clarification.
Okay, I think that was fine.
Everyone.
We're good with it. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, and then, I just put, you just want me to go through, I don't need to take over that. There or that, do you want me to just keep going through that?
I don't think we have any that were not for you other than BDD, which Mr. Fallon also said take out, if you're thinking of taking out the line of the office.
Oh, well, hold on, can I do AFI first?
I think all the other ones.
Why don't we, I mean, let's just do it. That way we've done it. And we- okay.
Well, these are just the ones I had, though, I didn't know if anybody.
But that's okay.
I didn't
It doesn't-
either.
Okay, it's okay.
Melissa, I sent a note that I did. Especially these.
Oh, yes, I got it.
That's good, Mr. Fallon.
Oh,
Well, I get one, but he had to know.
okay, sorry,
You are on.
I'm on. Look so fast, okay, AFI, so that one, the only why I had it on my list was because of the, see the note on the use of certificated, that Dr.
Yeah,
Steve.
they will make those in the final process, because they need to go through the entire manual. to ensure that it's sent out.
Okay. BBBBE. So that was, what was the, okay, oh, I just had, mine was actually having to do with the question of I will, so I didn't have this as an issue.
This one was just making sure that we were aligned with the code that was provided by Judge Myers, because it wasn't in our policy. It's a standard from OSBA to figure that out.
Wait, so you want
It says I will now. You change.
It does say
Yes, no.
No, I just asked for removal of the signature because I don't know that I've ever seen.
Oh, right, and it's still on there, so, or we're taking that off then, got it, okay. Okay, okay, so, BD, BDDB, BDDC, BDDF. So these all have to do with agendas, noticing school board meetings. So the question that I had, which was kind of a general one, was about the planning process, and it is the 24-hour policy, having it be 24 hours. Is this just specifically for the public in terms of when they're getting the agenda? So this has nothing to do with notification or information coming to the board, correct?
And BDDP is that the legislative agenda along with related material and minutes of previous meetings distributed to each member. So I believe that is for the member, but if you want that to be clarified.
So the question is, are we changing that to 24 hours in order for us to be in compliance with our policy? Or is that where we want to go as a board to say that 24 hours is enough notice? 24 hours is the minimum.
Maybe we add the word minimum,
Says at least.
or it does say at least.
Okay, then I'm fine with that.
So that's
And BDDC, playing DVD. CBA. Personal characteristics is what we took out.
Because we weren't really sure.
Anything else that kind of had to reflect on that, was everything, I mean, assuming everything else is okay.
Everything. I think it was more a question of, I think we captured the question that,
Okay. Okay, and then for ETE, which was, I just put that on the list in terms of you have information from the tech director around cybersecurity protocol, so, yeah.
on this one, what I think is gonna be important, and I know Mr. Long is working on a few other things around cybersecurity, and while this isn't exactly that, I think it probably will maybe come back as a full package, or not,
Okay.
not as much division, but when we get through that, so staff, keep working on it with staff to make sure it's all aligned, because I think that's what they.
Okay, I just didn't want to lose sight of getting that information.
So my recommendation would be look
I'm okay
through it
with the
as
policy,
is,
and
and
if we have to
bring
go
it
back to
after we have to match together.
Okay, that's fine.
Any estimation, Mr. Long, that the board can expect that time? Just been spread.
No, well, we're working through, we had a cyber assessment also, we're working through getting some of those things. Say, look at like summertime.
Think it's summer meeting time.
Yeah, it would be great.
Thank you.
Okay, and then just two other, so ETAC and ETAC-R. The only question that I was basically more information back to the board about stipends for telephone services, but that's not to affect changing or approving the policy. It's just more about how we determine who gets reimbursed on just. And then for KDA, public's right to know. The question that I had here in this was sort of done. Thank you for the clarification that we're including it as standing off. We're including it as a standing authorization of the organizational meeting about who is our public records designee. And the only question that I had is it typically the treasurer? Does it have to be the treasurer? Or I don't think it has to be, but is it typical that it is?
Yeah,
I know that we do it, but I just, okay. I have no issue on that.
Hear what you said, that last question that you asked.
Oh,
Sorry.
I know it's not everyone was mine. The question is the policy KBA, and it's on the public's right to know. And it's when we designate who in our district is our public records person.
Okay.
And my question was, does it have to be the treasurer, or could it be someone else? Or is it and it's typically the treasurer? So if we do that in our organizational meeting, I don't have an issue with the policy.
Okay, thank you. It could be a member of the board. I mean.
Okay, we're not.
Just throwing that out there.
The assistant superintendent just-
Okay, and then in the home stretch here, policy KJA, distribution of materials in schools. And that was, the question was, is there anything else that we need from Kenna, or is the policy as it's written okay? So it says that left as is and provided additional resources to treasure on topic. Was that anything that we need to see as a board in terms of the distribution of load material? Does that mean that Kenna gave you materials? About that?
I just think when, it's one of those things that as long as you, I would say, if you can keep things That would be great. We could make sure that we're not in violation first.
I think that, yeah, I mean, definitely First Amendment rights, but I do think that we had a couple of situations, Mr. Bell and I talked about this. I think that, for example, for school activities, and I think it kind of happened with the homecoming parade. And we had political, like different political candidates in the parade, you know, not just in the parade as like I support Sycamore and I'm wearing green and gold, but it was more like, here's my literature, here's my, and I think we agreed that that's not the place for that. So I just want to make sure that our policy covers that.
And that is in our campaign guidelines.
Right.
But maybe there needs to be a reference.
I know, Mr. Ballot, and we had do you remember that conversation?
I would like to see.
So can we add a reference?
that the homecoming is getting started. Students. Community focused.
So maybe we say something about school sponsored events or something like that, and you know, and that's for any, I mean, that's, you know, somebody running for judge, somebody running for Congress or whatever, just it's not the place for
I
it.
think it's fine, you just have to clarify. I think, I'm familiar with that situation, because I was with Rojas at that time, as you were too. There wasn't good clarification, and so therefore, then it occurred, and then of course, when one person does it, then another person can do it. I mean, that's just the way it goes. So just clarify, if you don't want that to happen,
Yeah.
put it in writing so that it's taken out.
So,
But I do think just, and as with all the policies, in general, back to the First Amendment stuff, not related to grades of that, but like the OSBA has really gone to great labors to like really vet what we're putting in, like giving us advice on what you should be careful of when it comes to some of the rights. So like we're allowed to be, maybe that's a question we first ask, how can we specifically write that so that, I mean, it makes complete sense that we put that in our board policy, but just so that ask her if we have to go to our legal counsel to ask that question, but hopefully we don't. I mean, I do trust that she has really vetted this to make sure we're following.
Yeah,
complying with
let's just
what-
follow.
Yeah, let's just follow on that. And then, for KLTR, the last one, you guys, that I put, that's so here and then here, it's almost done. It did it pretty fast for this. KLTR, I think that her question had been answered previously about the Title IX wording, and we are going to be compliant with federal law, so that's done too. So thank you very much for indulging me, and
I think, Mrs. Weber, we're down to 2 policies that you'll return with information for. And then the idea.
Bring that for approval of the approval next meeting.
thank you. And it's,
Yes, thanks. I need a motion for the approval of personnel consent agenda.
Second.
Rose, please call the roll.
White.
Aye.
Mr. Comer.
Aye.
Mr. Bitter. Aye. Mr. Balance.
Aye, that motion passes. Need a motion to go into executive session for ORC 121.22G1. Employment and or discipline of a public employee, official or regulated individual. 121.22G3 to confer with an attorney for the board concerning disputes involving the board that are subject to pending or imminent court action. And ORC 121.22G8 economic development. And we do expect to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Weber, please call roll.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Bitter. Aye. Mr. Comer.
Aye.
Mr. Balance.
We will now go into executive session. Thank you, everybody.
8:29, pretty good. Wow.
That's